That was Lesley Gore with her number 5 hit from June of 1963, Judy's Turn to Cry. Lesley passed away a little over a year ago, but her musical legacy is celebrated in the book You Don't Own Me, The Life and Times of Lesley Gore by Trevor Tolliver. Trevor, welcome to the show.
All right, thank you for having me.
Your book was published in August of last year, and I mentioned that Lesley passed away in February. How long were you actually working on this project?
Probably about 5 years before that, and started sort of punching out a rough draft while I was still a college student in between classes. And it just sort of grew over time. It was something I was doing just for my own sake, because I was frustrated that I couldn't find basically a complete story of her in one place. Then over the years, people started talking to me, and heroes and major influences on my own life started doing interviews for the book, and it became a much more significant project. I'd actually sent her a complete draft of it in the fall of 2013, but at that time she was just starting to work on a musical about her life, so she declined to participate in the project. But I had the book finished in 2014 and started making the rounds. And interestingly enough, it was rejected by an agency that sort of touted some feminist credentials. I'd contacted them in January, just about a month before Lesley passed. And basically, you get used to sort of the general form letter rejections, but still they're written very nicely. Well, this one agency even wrote back and said, no one's interested in this.
Jeez.
And then a month later she passed, and of course there was worldwide interest, and her fans just all over the world grieved for her. So. And that was sort of what was so frustrating is that lack of interest in her life sort of plagued her the last few years of her life.
You mentioned starting to write this book while you were in college, so you couldn't have been around for Lesley's first flush of success. But how did you discover Lesley Gore's music?
I was 5 years old when I first heard It's My Party, and I can tell you what I was doing and where I was the moment I heard her, and there was just something about her voice that resonated. And I was just a lifelong fan ever since then, and just wrote the book from a fan's point of view. Even my own children, I adopted my sons, and my youngest was 2, and we were told that he probably would never be able to speak because of some developmental delays. And oddly enough, it was Lesley's music that got him speaking. He was able to sing along with the music, and his first word was party. So
wow,
there's just something about her that just resonates. And we started a friendly correspondence back and forth throughout 2013 and 2014. That was book or no book. That was just a thrill of a lifetime.
Well, after telling me that story, you had to write the book.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of love behind it.
When it comes to these young singers in the 60s, there seems to be this notion that the producers were Svengali types. Can you tell us a little bit about Lesley's relationship with Quincy Jones?
Sure. I think it started off a little bit that way, only in that her demos went to the producers of Mercury, and they all passed except Quincy, who heard some potential in her voice. So there was a little bit of taking charge and wanting to nurture that out of her. But what Quincy always says is that her voice was just full of this raw talent, and she had a great sensibility for the jazz singers, and really knew how to nurse and massage a lyric out of music. Which is very uncommon for those, 15 and 16-year-old singers back in the day. As wonderful and cute as they were, they just didn't quite have that sensibility that Lesley was somehow able to articulate in her music. So she brought to him just this wealth of amazing talent that he was able to cultivate. So I think it was a very mutually beneficial relationship.
Now, I asked you to pick out a few songs that you feel best represent Lesley Gore, and we're going to play them. And one of the ones you picked out was It's My Party. Obviously a huge hit, but a timeless record. That
not only started her career, but really became sort of a cultural phenomenon that gained international fame and popularity. It spawned copycats and responses, and was just such a huge cultural milestone for early pop.
Our guest today is Trevor Tolliver. His book, You Don't Own Me, The Life and Times of Lesley Gore, is the topic of discussion. I know that Lesley would eventually head to Hollywood, as you do in show business, but you can take the girl out of Tenafly, but you can't take Tenafly out of the girl, right?
Absolutely. She was very much a hometown girl, and she was very proud of where she came from. She spent a little time out west here in California during part of her career. But really, she was always happiest back east. It's where her family was. It's where her very close circle of friends were. And she was very profoundly influenced by politician Bella Abzug, who really made it a point to look out for your community, do as much as you can for the people around you. So Lesley often would help curate shows for local theaters and musical workshops for students. She was always connected with fans. She really liked giving back to the community. She'd visit fans in hospitals. She'd go right to where they were to sing to them if they couldn't come to her.
Right.
So all that, I mean, a lot of hometown pride. She liked being home. She liked really celebrating that New York sort of East Coast vibe.
When Lesley was out on the West Coast, she did a slew of movie and TV appearances. She was in Ski Party, Girls on the Beach. She did the Donna Reed Show, and most famously, Batman. Did she enjoy doing that kind of work, or was it just a distraction for her?
She seemed to love it. She said in quite a few interviews that she still had the costume, so I know that was that was a lot of fun for her. And she was so young; she could just jump into something silly as Batman and really just enjoy that.
A number 13 hit for Lesley Gore in 1965, Sunshine, Lollipops, and Rainbows. Our guest today is author Trevor Tolliver. His book, You Don't Own Me, The Life and Times of Lesley Gore. There was a time after the 60s where Lesley wasn't all that comfortable performing some of her biggest hits, but she kind of had a little turnaround with that, right?
Over time, she sort of accepted it. There was a time in her life, especially in the 70s, where she had bills to pay and really had no choice but to sort of dust off the old hits just to get the people to come in. And she, over time, I think, came to terms with those hits and really appreciated them and accepted them as part of her entire career. She was often fond of saying, you know, there's your career then and there's your career now, but whether it was 50 years ago or yesterday, it's still your career. A lot of people think that her career just sort of dried up in the late 60s. And usually you can't find anything about her beyond, you know, a paragraph here and there, and then the rest of her life is summed up in a sentence or two, as if she just sort of put her career on hold.
Right.
But she did a lot of work behind the scenes with films throughout the 80s and 90s. And then from the 90s on, I think the sort of camp factor came in where people looking back at her career were appreciating that sort of 60s kitsch element. So she came back in a big way. The old became new again. And she started making more appearances on television. And by the mid-2000s, when she released her new album, I think she was ready to kind of get back into the game to be taken seriously again as an artist. And that last album just really shows some wonderful songwriting and vocals.
One of the revelations in your book, at least for me, I had no idea about this, Lesley's music had been embraced by the hip-hop community.
I think that really speaks to her influence and how it never really waned over the years. I mean, current artists still look to her music. She was from a time when the artists, their music was just so genuine and so honest, probably because they were so young when they were performing those original hits, that they really could put their heart into it and believe what it was that they were projecting. So I think I think that's lost today, so modern artists keep reaching back to those heroes. And you'll hear her music sampled by hip-hop artists. An Australian artist named Grace just remade You Don't Own Me, and it became a huge hit all over the world. So there's this Lesley Siren Call is still out there and very, very strong.
Well, you picked You Don't Own Me as one of your songs that best represents Lesley Gore. It's a unique song, certainly a powerful song, and unique for its time, because that kind of anthem of independence was something that a lot of young girls around Lesley's age were probably waiting for. You know, they didn't hear things like that on the pop charts.
Oh, absolutely. And that really could have gone either way. That could have been a huge hit because it was doing something so different, or it could have just come and gone and even maybe have ended her career just because the statement was perhaps too bold for that time. But if you look at some of the other fare that was coming out by and for teenagers, particularly female singers, I mean, nothing can compare to that. It was always about being subservient, sort of being at the will of a boy. So this was very different for this young girl, a 17-year-old girl, just to shake her finger and say, you have no rights over me, don't you dare tell me what to do. And for that, it just resonates. You still really don't hear that so much anymore. That was her favorite, and it said so much and did so much. And I think that's definitely sort of the crown jewel there in her canon.
Tolliver, his book, You Don't Own Me, The Life and Times of Lesley Gore. Trevor, well, this book is out, so what else have you got coming out? Any other books?
Actually, over the summer, I read some great books that celebrated different movements during the early 60s, like the surf sound and Motown and the girl groups, and there's some really great definitive books out there about those different little fads during such a sort of a brief window of rock music time. But no one's really looked at the death records in great length, the splatter.
Oh, wow. What a topic.
My parents graduated high school in 55 and 64, so just that little window of time is exactly what I grew up listening to. And I would love to kind of further the conversation about that little fad that was huge when it happened, and it had its own detractors and controversy, and I think that would be a great story to tell.
Yeah, you could have Patches, the book. I mean...
Absolutely.
So if people wanted to catch up with you and what you're doing, and let's say this book is coming maybe in next year or so, where would they go to do that?
The easiest place, you can find me on Facebook. It's just Trevor Tolliver. I'm there on Facebook, and I love connecting with people. I've made a lot of great new friends since the Lesley Gore book came out, and that's the easiest way to contact me directly. I'm right there.
All right. Well, once again, it was a fascinating read. I know the book has been doing really, really well, and there definitely was a need for it.
Yeah, it enjoyed being a #1 top seller in biographies on Amazon, and it's been selling pretty steadily since. So I'm glad that people, for Leslie's sake, are going out there and wanting to explore her music. And the greatest compliments I ever got were from people who wrote and said that there was so much more out there they didn't know about her, that the biggest frustration for them was having to stop at every page and go try and track down this music. So
right.
I love that. I'm very, very proud if I was able to help kind of get her music out there a little bit.
Absolutely. Trevor, it's been a pleasure speaking with you, and I encourage everybody to go and check out the book, You Don't Own Me, The Life and Times of Lesley Gore. And to wrap up this conversation, let's go with another one of your picks, the songs you feel best represent Lesley Gore.
I would end with Ever Since, which was on her last album. And it just seemed like a really poignant moment in her career where everything sort of came full circle. And it was one of her final great songs.